Hello, and welcome back to the sim. In this one, we're here on the ground in CYYZ, Toronto Pearson Airport. And hey, we got simple traffic working as well. Seeing a lot more planes with the correct liveries. Obviously some other stuff looks a little different, like CJ4s for RJs, but hey, one day we'll figure it all out. In this one, we're talking about the Bravo. And we're gonna jump into the CRJ and cover our Honeycomb Alpha and Bravo configurations through Spad.next. Let's go ahead and jump in. Now, we're going to cover the Alpha and then jump into the Bravo. So, real quick, as always, when you look at device settings, settings global, watch my other videos and you'll understand why I've set these up, how I've configured these. But if you want to use my profiles that we'll post at the end of the video, you're going to need these set the same way. So button 1 through 18, you can see how everything is set up. And then we'll slide on down. There you go. There's the rest of it. So those are the settings that you have to have. You can watch other videos if you want me to walk through explaining why. So let's go ahead and start on button number 1. Button number 1 on the Alpha is the push to talk switch on the left-hand side. That's my vJoy button. I use vJoy to trigger vPilot for push to talk. That way, whether I'm using a side stick, the Alpha Yoke, or a different Yoke or device, I don't have to constantly change vPilot. Number 2, this is the white button on the left-hand side of the Yoke. So on a short press, we are going to do the Send Autopilot Off event that will turn off the autopilot. If you hold it for longer than 1 second, it will also disconnect the yaw damper, so turn off the yaw damper, and turn off the autopilot event. So that way we don't ever toggle it back on. Short press, kick off the autopilot when we're short final, and then when we're ready to get full rudder authority, we can go ahead and disconnect the yaw damper. Button 3, that is the white button on the right hand handle. That I have nothing assigned to. 4 is the red circular button. That I also have nothing set to. 5 and 6, those are the trim switches on the left-hand side. I have those set to trim up, trim down, but they're conditional. It's looking at 7 and 8, which have nothing assigned. These allow the split trim function that I've explained before. 8, 9, again, the other 2 switches, they're just used together. If you wanted to break this up, get rid of the conditional events and have separate switches, go for it. 10, 11, 12, and 13, those are the rocker switches on the right-hand side of the yoke, the left-right ones. These could be applied to aileron trim or some other settings. Again, I have not set these to anything. Feel free to figure it out for yourselves. 13 is our no smoking switch, and that's on the master alternator. What you'll find is 2 is on, 0 is auto. We move next to the seatbelts, and the seatbelt sign is again same thing. 2 is on. 17 is the avionics 1 switch, and we're using that for the emergency lights. And again, 2 is on, 0 will put it into the arm state. And then when we move to the last one, avionics bus 2, that's for the ELT. 2 sets it to the reset. 1 sets it to the reset. 0 sets it into the arm state. So down, that's on, ELT is on, and then put it back to 0, puts it back up in the arm state. 23, this is, 21. This is our beacon light. Since it's labeled beacon, let's assign it to the beacon. 23, this is going to be landing lights. So left, nose, and right for landing lights. 25 is your taxi light. So taxi recognition lights on and off. For the nav lights on 27, we've gone ahead and put those for nav and logo. Might as well have logo and nav lights come on at the same time. We went ahead and put our strobe light on the strobe light switch. 31, 32, 33, 34, 35. These are the switches that are associated with the magneto starter key. Now, when you set it to 31, it will set the IRS knobs to 0. When you set it to 32, it will set them to 1. So that'll turn on your IRS aligns. 33, that is going to trigger the stab trim switch buttons. 34 is going to be the mock trim. So I decided that I was going to use this switch as the means to get those last few items going after we've done a startup and need to initialize those functions. 35, I've left blank for now. Maybe somebody else will come up with a great idea for it. X and Y, I've still left those mapped in the sim, partially because of how I use the sim's ability to flip the axes when you're in a drone camera shot. Hat switches. I map these to vJoy buttons, and then I map those vJoy buttons inside of the sim to the camera looking around. So getting that ability to look around with the hat switch, this gives me that indirection that we need. Now, there have been changes to the SDK, and one of these days I might get around to trying to see if I can use it directly with the new camera LVAR stuff that they put in. But for now, vJoy works great. There's a whole other tutorial on how to use vJoy. So now we're going to move on over to the Bravo. So working with the Bravo, let's go ahead and bring the camera in so that we've got both images showing. Now, one of the benefits of the Bravo is it's also got the autopilot control system built in, so we've gone ahead and mapped that as well. Now, getting yourself familiar with how the Bravo works, button 1 does start up here with the heading button on the autopilot control. So when you press that for a short press, that will enable heading mode, and it will press the buttons and the animations. So again, we can go through all that in the sim and kind of see how that all works afterwards. You're also going to see that if you hold it for longer than 1 second, we'll press the heading sync button, and that will sync our heading bug for our autopilot to our current heading. So like pressing the little round button inside of the knob. Button number 2 is our nav button. So that's going to enable the nav button on the FCP. And if you hold it for longer than 1 second, we'll do a course 1 direct button. So again, in the course knob, there is a push button, and we've gone ahead and mapped that push button. Button number 3, this is our approach button. So we've mapped that to the approach mode. Button 4 is the VNAV button. So it's reverse course. I don't really ever use back course or reverse course, so I've gone ahead and assigned that to VNAV. Now, if you wanted to, you could double it up. You could make it that holding down the reverse course button would send reverse course. Next up, we've got our altitude button, so that's going to do our altitude button on a short press. On a long press, it will press the cancel button, which is the circular button inside of the altitude knob. 6 is our VS button, so we've mapped it to VS. 7 is the IAS button. And so here we've gone ahead and we mapped the short press to enabling speed mode, which is the same as IAS or flight level change. But we've gone ahead and put the hold of the button to press the Mach and IAS speed changeover button. So that's the button, again, the circular button inside of the speed knob. So hold it for a second and it will press that button. So for speed, altitude, course, and heading, we do have the 3 buttons in the knobs by using the held button press. Moving on to button number 8, this is the Autopilot master control button, and you'll notice by pressing it, we use the changing of the AP engage button, as well as we fire off the animation for it. Now, this is something you're going to see in a lot of these buttons, is to get it to animate and make the sounds, you have to not only trigger the button animation, but you have to set an LVAR to a value. So here you'll see that we set the LVAR to 1, which engages the LVAR event, which maps the button was pressed. It will automatically reset to 0. Then this animation will give it so that it pushes the button in and then waits 100 milliseconds and releases the button. And again, we'll show that in a little bit. Button 9 is one of the thrust reversers. I believe it's this one when you pull back the thrust reverser. Button 10 is this axis, so the third axis, this reverser, when you pull it up, it fires a button. And what we did, since it's a switch, is when it switches on, it will send the throttle 1 decrease event, wait 100 milliseconds, send it again, wait 100 milliseconds, send it again. This will get you to -25, which is full reverse thrust. When it switches off, it will send the throttle cut event so that you don't have to move the axis to pull it out after turning off the thrust reverser. So that works really well. Rinse and repeat on button 11 and change them out for throttle 2. 12, again, would have been the fourth axis reverser when you have a 4-engine axis. 13 is where we get into the encoder. So the encoder is 13 for clockwise and 14 for counterclockwise. Now what we've done here is we've leveraged conditional events. So when we mapped events to it, we also mapped a joystick follow. So it's looking at button 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And that's because 17 through 21 is this control switch. So the Autopilot control selector is 17 when on IAS mode, 18 on course, 19 for heading, 20 for VS, and 21 for altitude. So then what we're doing is we're looking at what one is enabled and sending the events only when that is. Hence, and processing so it doesn't spend time looping through the other events. So for 17, we are going to change the speed. And again, same thing. This will tell it to move or increase the event, basically turn the knob. But we want to turn the animation of the knob, and we do that by moving the selector by 10 degrees. Now, with the most current release, version 1014, whatever it is, the release that came out when they launched the CRJ 900 1000, animation events no longer work. So we've lost our ability to animate from external events, but I'm leaving them in anyway because they might restore it since we've complained. So effectively, you set a 1 to this LVAR, it will increment it. You set a -1, it will decrement it, and it instantly puts it right back to 0. Then I'm going to increment the selector, so the animation, basically the position of the selector, by 10. We're going to set the limits to on so that it rotates 0 to 360, and then it'll roll over. Previously, if we didn't do this, it would actually get stuck and could keep spinning when it exceeded the value of the rollover. But we've gone ahead and done that for each one. So again, increment and do the rollover and end processing. So you'll see for heading selector, and we change the value, the wheel. And so we're doing the FCP wheel when we're on the VS, altitude change, Again, same thing when it's in that mode, you will be changing the altitude selector. We did a copy and paste to 14, and we just changed everything that was a 1 to a -1, and we changed the increments to decrements, and away we went. 15 and 16, this is the flaps selector. Now what I did here was I decided I wanted to look at the fact that with Alpha 33 or 32, I can't remember which one, a whole new set of events were added for the Aerosoft CRJ. So now instead of using that LVAR, change it by a 1 or a -1, you actually can move the selector increment decrement. However, these are LVAR events, so I think because it doesn't show up in the event monitor, this shows up in the data monitor. This is actually just setting those same LVARs, but giving it to us in the event menu. So if you're starting from scratch, this is another way to do it instead of using the change data event with a 1 and a -1. So I put them on here just to test it out. But now that I know what it does, I'm not going to change my events. So I'm going to delete these because I was just using it as a test. Whoops, delete event. 16, delete event. So that's your flaps up and flaps down switch. And again, nothing mapped to it right now. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Again, this is the autopilot left rotary selector. I didn't map anything to it. Instead, like I said, I was using the device itself to be the condition. Now, another approach could have been to have created a local variable, and that would have been how we tracked the modes. So each switch would have set the local variable, and then we would have used the local variable in the condition over on buttons 13 and 14. 22 and 23. So this is your elevator trim. So 22 is rolling forward and 23 is rolling back. So we got trim down, we've got trim up, and that's what we mapped. 24 is the detent button or switch at the bottom of the first axis. And since we have nothing for that, we've left it blank. 25 is the detent for the second axis, and nothing's mapped because we've disabled this axis and we've got the guard on it for use with the CRJ. 26, this is the detent for the left throttle or the RZ axis. Now what we've done here is we're using this for the actual cutoff inside of the sim. So when we switch off, and a switch off is coming out of the detent, we will trigger the cutoff to a 1, so we'll see the little handle flip up, and then we will set the throttle position to 400, and that will move the throttle into the cutoff, or sorry, out of the cutoff and into the idle position, and automatically, because of the timer set, this resumes to 0, and you'll see the animation of the handle go down. When we switch on, so when it goes into the detent, we will trigger that cutoff so that it opens up the lever, and then we will move the position to 500, which moves it all the way down into that fuel cutoff position. So this works awesome for the entire throttle assembly. I really like it. It allows reversers to work like reversers, and we have the cutoff position by clicking through that detent. On 27, that switch works the exact same way. We've gone ahead, but of course, putting in the throttle 2 and cutoff 2. 28 is this axis detent. 29 is this guy's button. Then 30 is this and this share the same auto throttle disconnect or TOGA button, depending on what you want to set it up for. I set it up for TOGA. 31, that now comes back over to here for the gear set up. So when we go up, you'll see 31 goes on. And when we go down, that's 32. And that's gear set event 1. So that's going to go ahead and move our gear. 33 is when we come back across to the 6th axis in the lower position. Very strange. Don't know why they align that way, but they do. 34. So that's where we jump up to our rocker switches. And again, there is actually a button on the top and bottom of each of these rocker switches, which, as per the other videos, we've disabled all the buttons and we've told it that all the tops are switches. The first switch is the parking brake. So we can go ahead and we have our parking brake off. We have our parking brake on. I've made labels. I'm actually going to do a separate little video sometime, but I'm going to buy Avery magnetic sheets that you can print with a laser printer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the magnetic tape on the bottom. So then I can just peel them off with magnetics and then stack them off to the side magnetically, holding them up. Right now I just use a little bit of tape, but then the tape wears out. Our next switch, button 36. This is our spoilers. So going into auto mode, so our ground spoilers into auto mode or off. Left reverser, we've gone ahead. Armed reverser left is armed is up, off is down. Then we've got reverser right. So the second reverser, again, same thing, armed off. I decided on the next switch, I was going to go ahead and put the anti-skid armed and off. And then I decided to use 45 and 46 for the engine starters. Considering how everything else is set up with my system, I kind of felt like those were perfectly good positions to use the engine start-stop switches. Again, there's going to be a lot more with my Stream Deck, and so I may free those up for something else on the throttle quadrant in the future, since I will be doing a full Stream Deck overhead and probably most other switches eventually over time into the Stream Deck, but that takes a lot of time to do. Moving over to the axes, so spoilers, the CRJ reacts perfectly to the standard spoiler axis. Nothing on this one. On the RZ, we went ahead and we have to use the throttle 1 axis set external 1. And so the way I've set this up is range definition is a yes, 0 to 123. Rescale value is a yes, minus 16383 to 16383. And then we send that to throttle 1 axis set external 1. We make sure to axis value use it and use the raw value, which will use the rescale value. Maybe should say use raw / rescale value, but whatever. And we don't need to invert this axis. RY, we did the exact same thing. So we went ahead and we set that same way, but to throttle 2 axis set. And then with the flaps, we were able to use the standard flaps auto detent, and that gave us everything that we needed. So if I want to find this, click on a button, go to online snippets. You may need to turn off only for this aircraft, especially if you're in the 900 or 1000, and you may have to show all devices if you can't find it under the complete device. Now, next up, if we search for, I do that, then do that, okay, search first, then go to complete device. So what you're going to find is Microsoft Flight Sim, ASCRJ, Honeycomb, Bravo. Now remember, this currently can only be downloaded if you're in the alpha. If this is the future and you're on a higher version than 0.9.11, don't worry about these words alpha. If you're on the alpha, you should have access to this. If you're not on the alpha, maybe you shouldn't be on the alpha. You don't need to be on the alpha to work with the CRJ. You can rebind all these controls, walk through the tutorial, and map it yourself. Not recommending that you do the alpha switchover if you're not prepared to have things sometimes not work. So you'd click OK, and when it prompts you, do you want to replace all events on this device? You hit yes. Same thing. Online snippets. You may have to select all devices and turn off only for current aircraft. Sometimes more than one alpha yoke could show up. In my case, I don't see another one, so I'm going to go ahead, go to complete device, and there we have it. ASCRJ alpha yoke from this video. Now, I have previously published an alpha yoke, which I think had all those same things. That was done, well, maybe longer ago, maybe not. So this is the one that's going to have everything that we did today. Let's go ahead now, jump into the sim and walk through how some of this works. So things that you don't see are things like my switch panel. I've already got, fuel pumps and things mapped to the switch panel. So instead of manually pressing those, I do it down here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get the APU fired up. We're also going to get our hydraulics going. You can see the beacon light. So we got our beacon on, turn our landing lights off, turn our taxi light off. We're going to turn our nav and logo lights on, and we're going to go ahead and turn our strobe off. So that's all done on the alpha. Then you also see the master alternator switch. So turn the seatbelt, the no smoking on, or put it into auto. Seatbelt signs on, or put it into auto. There's our emergency lights on, auto, and then ELT on or back into ARM mode. So that covers everything on our yoke. So next up, we're going to start the start sequence. So we're going to look up, right? We've got our start switches. So we're going to start the right engine first. So we're going to go ahead and kick the right engine into start mode. So now that the engine is spooling up, we can go ahead. There's our N1. Sorry, our N2 above 20. There we go. Fuel is now going in, and you saw the handle move up. So let's go ahead, start the left engine while we're at it. Do this quick. So you see the start go off. We're waiting for the N2 to rise. There we go. Go ahead, move the throttle into the idle position. Fuel is now going in. Okay, so our engines have started successfully. Now, what you have to remember is the start-stop switches are for during the start process. So if I put this back down into the stop position and it sends the stop command, it won't actually shut the engines down. So you can choose to leave them in the start or put them into the stop. It's completely up to you. I want to make sure that I arm my anti-skid. I'm going to arm my reverse thrusters. And so we can see that down here. All right, there's our reversers. Let's go ahead and put our ground spoilers into auto mode. Over here, we've got our IRSs, and that's where on the alpha, on the key, when we move it from the off to the R position, it puts both of my IRSs into nav mode. When we go to the L position, it's going to press our stab trim. So now our stab trim, we're aligned, our stab trim's good. And now what you'll see is our mock trim is still yellow. So when we move that into the both position, we press our mock trim. And now that's out. So the only thing left is the yaw damper. So we can press the yaw damper buttons here to engage them. But I actually have something on my MCP, and when I press it, that does the pressing of the yaw damper buttons for me. So now, because we're good, we can go ahead and we can stop our APU, which I happen to have on a switch. So that's going to fire down the APU, and it's going to close the door. So on that switch, I actually left a really long pause, which waits a little bit of time and then closes the APU door for it. You can see how nice the speed brake works. You can see the flap detents. So we can move our flaps, listen for the click, and know where they are. Then of course you've got your throttles, and we've got our reversers. So we're going to go ahead and see if the reversers can back us up. So now, looking at the flight controls, or the FCP, our mode control panel. Now luckily the modes will come up over here, so we can see everything there. So when we set it to altitude, the top one, we can go ahead and turn our knob. So there you go, 30,000. So let's say we're going to climb up to 23,000. There we go. If we're in VS mode, now you can see the VS decrease and the VS increase. So again, nose up and nose down attitudes. Turn off, we're back into pitch mode. Speed mode. So if we enable speed mode enables, you see the climb. If we go down to our speed mode at the very bottom over here, now you can go ahead and you can set your climb speed. Reverse, like we said, we've got VNAV, so VPath is enabled. Now path is disabled. We've got our approach mode, right? So we've gone into approach mode. We have our NAV mode, so FMS1 is armed. And instead, we can go into heading mode, turn the knob to heading mode, and now you see your heading adjust. Once we have everything set up, we can go ahead, click autopilot. It will arm the autopilot. Everything's armed. Obviously, let's not do this on the ground. Press it. It will always push the button, which in the CRJ, you need to use the disconnect to actually disable the autopilot. And again, if I hold down that disconnect button, it will also turn off my yaw damper. So doing everything we wanted to do, kick the yaw damper back on, everything works exactly how we want, and everything is now ready to go. So we're going to depart off of runway 24. Right, so let's go ahead, get lined up. So we're going to use that heading button, hold it down, and it syncs our heading bug for us. Now, of course, we're going to want to go ahead and we're going to press the TOGA button. Puts us into takeoff mode. Flaps are set. Everything is ready to go. So we're going to go ahead, hold our brakes, bring the power up, let it stabilize, and go ahead and put it into TOGA. V1, rotate, we're above 2, tap the brakes, gears going up. So we're currently on a vector as we're climbing out. So at this point, we're going to climb up to our altitude and our VS. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into speed mode, right? And we're going to stay in heading mode. There's our heading mode. Going to go ahead and put our autopilot on. And now the autopilot has it. We're going to pull our throttles back into the climb detents. And now we're going to go to our speed. And we're going to start speeding that speed up. Going to go 240 to 10. Then we're going to go to our direct page. Oh, no, that was flight plan 2. Where did I put direct? Ah. Direct 2. Let's go direct to Maven. And execute. So we are now direct to Maven. We're going to get our flaps up as we speed up. And now we're going to go ahead. And we are going to turn into Maven. Mind you, should have done heading from here. Keep reaching up to my other controller. Okay, so we've got our heading set. And our nav's coming in, so let's go ahead and arm FMS1. So there we go. And it grabs it, and away it goes. So now we're through 10,000, so let's go ahead. Let's go back to speed mode. Let's get us up to 290. Just going to pitch forward. There's our 290. And now, let's go ahead, change back to altitude mode. And let's increase our altitude. We're going to go up to... Oh. Got a little greedy. We only want to go up to 28,000. $28,000. Well, with that, I want to thank you guys for dropping in to look at how we're doing the Bravo. And, well, the Alpha. On the next one, we'll probably get into the Stream Deck, or we might get into something else. Not sure at this time. If you haven't, please go ahead and hit that like button at this point. And if you still are on the fence, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.